right, G, hit it.
Drum roll. Oh. What did the DNA say to the other DNA? Do these genes make me look fat? Good, that's a good one. Okay. You know, a friend of mine didn't pay for his exorcist. Didn't pay his exorcist. He got repossessed. What did the man name his dogs? Why did he name his dogs Rolex and Timex?
Because they were watchdogs, G. That's a repeat.
A man walks into a pet store and asks for a dozen bees. The clerk carefully counts out 13 bees on the counter. That's one too many, the customer said, and the clerk says, oh, it's a freebie.
A freebie.
And that's the one about the inside. Oh yeah. What do you call a mouse that swears? A cursor. Took a while for that to click, didn't it?
A mouse who curses or swears, a cursor.
Oh. Took a while for that.
All right. We are in 2 Kings 18. We're nearing the end. We're just on week 32. Okay, so from last week, Israel has fallen. The Assyrians now have that land. And now we have a new king in Judah. And it says in verses 1 through 8, we're going to set the context. In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He removed the high places, and broke the pillars, and cut down the Asherah, and he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days the people of Israel had made offerings to it. It was called Nehushtan, I guess. He trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among the kings of Judah after him, nor among those who were before him. For he held fast to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept the commandments that the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him wherever he went. He prospered. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. He struck down the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. Now, is he the first one that destroyed the high places, or did we have one other king? Yeah, I think he might.
I thought he was first.
I think he's the first. I've studied it for so long, it's all kind of running
before
together.
Before they left the high places alone.
So we've not had a single king that destroyed that. I thought Josiah destroyed. Are we to Josiah? Where is Josiah? Have we already done Josiah?
I think he passed away. I don't know.
No, we've not done Josiah. Okay, so Hezekiah is the very first king that got rid of the high places. So that was an interesting thing. He's one that trusted the Lord. He did what was right. He went further than any other king had so far, other than David. He dealt with all of the idolatrous sites and instruments that they used. And he has a high compliment of doing according to all that David, his father, had done. So the result of his obedience to the Lord is prosperity, success, and as we'll see, even military dominance. Because it's hard to take territory if the Lord's not with you. And so he's able to do that. And the Philistines, they were like thorns in their side. They were a seafaring people, but they were always causing problems, or there was always this conflict with them. Now, okay, so during his reign, and I'm not sure exactly when, he rebelled against Assyria, which tells us that obviously they were under Assyria because they were paying tribute. At the point where he made this decision is where Sargon died and Sennacherib took over, which we saw that today with Putin. When there's a change of guard, then rogue or rebellious rulers will then make their move. And so here we see that he's like, okay, there's a change in the guard, and this is the opportune time to quit paying tribute. And so after he did that, Sennacherib, he didn't really deal with him at that point, because he was dealing with a whole bunch of other things. Also, Hezekiah made a treaty, a loose treaty with Marduk, the ruler in Babylon, who also rebelled. So now we're seeing Babylon again coming into the scene. It's not quite a superpower where it's going to rise up and become a dominant force. However, it's on stage, and we know that because when Daniel was, in captivity, he basically listed Babylon as the first kingdom. And what would you say, like the first kingdom in a line of kingdoms toward the end of the age, probably? Like it was the first, and probably the reason for that is because Judah fell. And then if you go to Genesis, I think it's chapter 49, because there's markers. God will give us markers on the end of the age. So in Genesis chapter 49, verses 8 through 12, Judah, your brothers shall praise you, your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies, your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub, from the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine, and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Now this right here, these scriptures are messianic. You see the colt, you see the foal, his garments washed in wine or his blood, right? So all of these are speaking of the Messiah, but in particular verse 10, where it says, his scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. In the New King James and King James, it says, until Shiloh comes. And Shiloh is he whose right it is what that means in the original language. This is the Lord. So when you look at what's happening here with Israel and Judah, the fact that Babylon and then, the Medo-Persians, then Alexander the Great, and then the Roman Empire, the reason those are significant is after Israel fell and then Judah fell, they only had what are those puppet rulers? They had rulers that were appointed by the nations that took over them. Okay, so they're called puppet rulers. So they weren't legitimate kings that passed down. They were puppet rulers that nations put over them. And that for a while they didn't even have a ruler, because when they were in Babylon, there was no such thing. So by the time Jesus came, there was a king again on the throne in Israel who was Herod. They called him the Great, probably the great mistake. He was part Edomite or Idumean in the Greek and part Jewish. So for the first time in the history of Judah, there was a king that was not full-blooded Jewish or from the line of David, right? That was a signal. The religious leaders, that's why the Lord was amazed at them. He's like, y'all can look outside and tell what weather is going to happen by looking at the sky, yet you can't discern the times. And so everything that the Old Testament, of which they were professionals, they should have known, when it says this, and there's not a king from Judah on the throne, that means Shiloh's there. But now, devil's advocate, they were blind and they were deafened, but it was because of their own hardness of heart, right? So they couldn't see, which is a dangerous place to be. But that's why in Kings, these arrangements, the geopolitical things that are going on are so important. It's the same today. The geopolitical things that are going on are going to play a role in the end of the age. So we need to pay attention to the shifts and what all is occurring, especially when you start seeing like 10 kingdoms joining forces and, a resurrection of a nation. Did y'all know? Okay, so this little side note, and I'm not saying that this is truth, but I find it interesting because inquiring minds want to know, right? Okay, so in Revelation, we have you have to understand when you're studying Revelation and it's talking about the Antichrist and the beast and blah blah. The Antichrist and the beast, I almost said beef, is both a person and a kingdom. Okay, so it's really important to understand that because at times he's referring to the kingdom, at times he's referring to the Antichrist, which to God they're all one and the same, but there are specific things against the kingdom, and then there are specific things that have to do with the man. One of those things is he will take a headshot, and then he'll be resurrected. I remember back when I was in my, teenage years, some wanted to know if maybe that was a hologram effect. Like, was he really resurrected, or was there a hologram likeness, blah, blah. Don't know. But what I do find interesting is they have now used holograms to move stuff. Did you know that? A hologram pushed objects. Yep. So, don't know if that's what that's talking about. I could go into other stuff that would blow y'all away, and people would be like, what? And then they want to bring my tinfoil and put on a tinfoil hat. But I'm telling you, there's some technology, there's some things that's happening that could actually set it up, because I want to know, how can the enemy resurrect a man? Life is in the power of God's hands. So unless God wants him resurrected, he ain't coming back.
No, it's a false thing, the resurrection.
So, or is a head wound referring to taking that kingdom out? Like it looks like it's taken out and then it resurrects. Because if you look at the context, it could be referring to the kingdom. So we don't know. We just know that Jesus came and that Babylon was the start of a shift toward his coming. And then we got Assyria, who's not even included in the whole thing, except that Assyria, Babylon, all of them were caused by Nimrod. He's the one that founded these nations, and he was the first one world ruler, and he was the first defiant, in-your-face ruler, like, no, we're gonna consolidate our power, not against outside enemies. He's the first world ruler that was saying, we're gonna consolidate our power against God. That's and most, there's like world rulers, and then there's antichrist people that their role is against God. Unfortunately, we have many of those in office. Okay, so he's a very interesting ruler. We're seeing this dynamic of alliances and nations coming on the scene. So he makes this treaty with Babylon, also because they had rebelled. And then he also had a temporary successful uprising to Egypt, led an uprising, and there was like an invigoration of the 25th dynasty. So now we've got three: Babylon, Egypt, and Judah joining forces against Sennacherib. They knew eventually he was going to attack for them not giving the tribute. So Hezekiah wisely began preparation for fortifying their cities, and I'm sure practicing warfare and making sure their skills are honed, and hopefully some food and things like that. Okay, so that sets the scene, because like we like to say, you do not rise to the opportunity, you rise to the level of preparation, right? So that's what he's doing. Okay, so in verse 9, we'll read 9 through 12. In the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, remember he's the puppet king that the king of Assyria put in, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it, and at the end of 3 years he took it. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. The king of Assyria carried the Israelites away to Assyria and put them in Hala and on the Habor, the river of Gozan, in the city of the Medes, because they did not obey the voice of the Lord, their God, but transgressed his covenant, even all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. They neither listened nor obeyed. Okay, I want to go back and just make this quick point. It's not in your notes. But in verse 4, where it says, he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. Remember, that was when they were complaining, and the serpents came out of nowhere and started biting them. And so he made this, and it's probably what's on, what are those things called? Ambulances?
Yeah.
And actually, that's kind of an interesting story of where that came from. But it probably looked very similar of a cross with this serpent, which was a prophetic picture of Christ becoming a curse for us on a tree.
Right.
But here's the principle. If you stay in the past, you begin to worship it. It's that simple. Okay? So, a movement has the word move in it. Meaning, if you ain't moving, you're just a mint. So, you always have to be taking ground. If you're not taking ground, you'll settle then and become a monument. Monuments are erected to worship. That's why the Lord, whenever he was transfigured, Peter, going back to a religious mindset, said, hey, we ought to do like 3 tabernacles or 3 monuments to this event. And the Father's like, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Now, obviously, he was a baritone and sounded much bigger than my voice. But don't get distracted by the past, good or bad. Because whether you're, stuck in the good or stuck in the bad, either way you're stuck. And what will happen is it will become something you worship. So sure enough, here they have this serpent that they looked upon, and all of a sudden they were healed. And instead of, celebrating that and moving on, they began to worship it. Okay? So that's just a little principle there. If you're stuck in the past, you'll begin to worship it. Okay. Now, here's a quick caveat. Good grief. What is wrong with me this morning? I cannot talk. To remind the readers that again, Israel has fallen into the hands of Assyria because they did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, even all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. So the author of this book is letting us know that the reason Israel no longer exists is they refuse to obey the Lord, and it's a life lesson of the 2 nations in contrast. But we know that actually they're sinning just as much, if not more, I think we learned last week, than Israel did. And so they're also on the pathway to destruction. Okay, now verses 13 through 18. So now we're to the 14th year of King Hezekiah. Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will bear. And the king of Assyria required of Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house. At that time, Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the doorposts that Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria sent to Tartan the Rabsaris and Rabshakeh with a great army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. And when they arrived, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway to the washer's field. And they came for the king. There came out when they called for the king, there came out to them Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the secretary, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder. Okay, now Lachish was a very important city to Judah. Let me read to you what the Lexham Bible Dictionary says about it. Lachish continued to enjoy a period of prosperity into the reign of Hezekiah. During this time, the city was densely populated, and the population rebuilt and enlarged its fortifications. The city gates from this period are the largest in Israel, according to Usishkin, measured 80 by 80 feet. So how many stories would that be? Like 8? 8 stories? Dang. You know what I'm saying? It's like a skyscraper. Lachish also featured a 200 by 360 feet courtyard that may have been used for practicing chariot maneuvers. Excavators recovered hundreds of jug handles bearing the Hebrew inscription LMLK, Limelech, or belonging to the king. The sun disk scarabs at Lachish more than any other site in Israel. These have been dated to the reign of Hezekiah and belong to jugs of provisions Hezekiah may have sent to Lachish in anticipation of the Assyrian invasion. So we have history, we have evidence that this occurred. Okay, so the Assyrian invasion and conquest in 701 BC, Hezekiah revolted against Sennacherib, leading a coalition of other regional rulers against the Assyrians. The prophet Micah included Lachish in its list of cities that Sennacherib would destroy, which probably seemed impossible, right, for it to be destroyed. You know, you got 8-story, tall, gates, right? Okay. Lachish is perhaps most famous for its destruction at the hands of Sennacherib and his army during his retributive invasion of Judah, depicted in wall reliefs found in Nineveh. One of the most prominent remains at the site is a siege ramp built by the Assyrians during the assault. It was built of large and small stones and topped with an earthen platform. As the Assyrians built their ramp, the Israelite defenders tried to counter them by raising the ground level on the other side of the wall in order to construct new defenses. This effort ultimately proved to be futile. A relief found by excavators in the ruins of Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh vividly depicts the siege. It shows Assyrian soldiers marching up the siege ramp in full battle gear, armed with bows and arrows, spears and shields, and employing battering rams and siege towers under a hail of arrows and burning torches launched by the desperate Israelite defenders. The reliefs they found depicting this battle were 8 feet tall by 80 feet long and wrapped around the room for all visitors to see and to be reminded to not mess with Assyria. Just pay your tribute and things will go well. That's called showing off, you know what I'm saying? Smack talking, which they have the proof, to back up their smack, right? Okay, so now we have this history. Now remember, Hezekiah and the people in Judah, they knew about this. They knew how they defeated Assyria. They knew what was going on, but they felt that they had God on their side, okay? Verse 19. And the Rabshakeh, which I'm not sure what that is, I'm assuming a representative, said to them, "Say to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you rest this trust of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war? In whom do you now trust that you have rebelled against me? Behold, you are trusting now in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it, such as Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all who trust him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses if you are able, on your part, to set riders on them. How then can you repulse a single captain among the least of my master's servants, when you trust in Egypt for chariots, for horsemen? Moreover, is it without the Lord that I have come up against this place to destroy it? The Lord told me, go up against this land and destroy it. Oh, now he's getting into some dangerous territory. Okay, first of all, this is 10 years later. Okay? 10 years later, from the point that Hezekiah quit paying tribute to now, that's how long it took him, because and there's another historical evidence, the Sennacherib prism calls Hezekiah overbearing and proud due to his role of partnering with Egypt and others to rebel. I guess Sennacherib had a lot of stuff he was dealing with, a lot of rebellion, a lot of things that he had to get in place, and that's why it took 10 years for him to finally deal with Judah, probably showing that they're not really that important in the scheme of things, but he's still not going to allow something like that to happen. Now, what's going on here is psychological warfare. Okay, first of all, he says, do you think mere words are strategy? In other words, what do you have to back up what you're saying? That could be said today of our government. You've got England refusing to talk with our president because he's screwing up the entire world. You know, they say, I heard this originally from Rick Joyner. He said, when America sneezes, the whole world has a heart attack. That's a responsibility of a superpower. That's why you have to take it seriously, and you have to steward the things you say, the things you do very carefully, because you can destroy other kingdoms, right? To whom much is given, much is required. The fact that we're not wiped out is absolutely incredible at this point. But you've got this guy that can't string sentences together, and so even terrorists won't talk to him. England won't talk to him. Saudi Arabia won't talk to him because he's ruining everything. He's making everything harder for everybody. So it's the same thing. If we had anybody that, let's take Putin for example, do you think mere words are strategy? In other words, are you going to back up what you're saying? No, you're not going to back up what you're saying, right? So this is what he's doing, psychological warfare. Then he's trying to sow strife between Hezekiah and his allies, reminding him that Egypt is not really much of a threat, and they will pierce the hand of anyone who tries to lean on them. In other words, you can't rely on them. They're going to turn on you or let you down at the very least. Then he goes to the heart of the problem that they've had from the beginning, and that's idolatry. So he's saying that this is happening to you because you got rid of the high places. So as a pagan, he's like, y'all have offended your God, therefore we're going to come against you because God told us to come against you, and we're going to destroy you. So if you've got these people that are already in trouble because they're worshiping idols, their conscience is already what? Weird, right? It's already seared, or they don't trust that God's going to take care of them because they know in their heart they've been doing wrong. And then this guy says the reason you're being attacked, it is religion. Religious people tell you the reason bad things are happening to you is because you made God mad. Right?
Yeah.
Now we know that sin can definitely start causing problems if it's unrepentant. But it's like, you know, if you get a cold, people are like, oh, you must have done something wrong. God's punishing you. Don't be a, what's his name? Rabshakeh? Don't be a Rabshakeh. Quit being a Rabshakeh. We need to remember that. Don't be a Rabshakeh. Okay, so we've got this doubt that he's sowing amongst the people. Verse 26. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah said to Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak in the language of Judah within the hearing of the people who are on the wall. But Rabshakeh said to him, has my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the men sitting on the wall, who are doomed with you to eat their own dung and to drink their own urine? Wow. Wow. You know, getting a little nasty there. Okay. Here's the deal. He's speaking Hebrew. How did Rabshakeh know Hebrew? Like, was he Hebrew? Or did he purposely learn it for this very reason? I mean, it's kind of interesting. Aramaic is like English today. So that was the language of diplomats and kings, and that's what they, the world language. And so for him to be speaking Hebrew, now he's getting inside the mind, right, of the people that are actually going to be fighting his army. And he's letting them know, you guys are going to be eating poop and pee. He's, gaslighting, threatening. So it's amazing that he knows the language, because that was a language that was very tightly kept among the Hebrew people, and they almost lost it, remember? And there was a Jewish man that rediscovered and was able to revitalize the Hebrew language. Did that happen before they became a nation again? I think it did. Or was it after?
I don't know. Somewhere right around there.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It is.
Okay, so then the Rabshakeh stood and called out in a loud voice in the language of Judah. Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you out of my hand. Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord by saying, the Lord will surely deliver us, and this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me, and come out to me. Then each of you will eat of his own vine, and each of you his own fig tree, and each of you will drink the water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die. And do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Uh-oh. Now he's picking a fight with God. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of whatever's, Henna and Ivah? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among the gods of the lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? Whoops. Whoops. Okay. He's doing a tactic that governments still do to this day, that our own government did to us during, let's just say, the plague. First of all, he was using fear, then aspiration. Okay? If you don't wear this mask, you're going to die. Not only that, you're a wicked, evil person because you're going to make others die. You got to have 57 vaccines and boosters. You can't go outside. You can't hug grandma and grandpa. You can't go to the store. You can't do nothing, you peasants. You stay at home. Because if you do, then it'll get over faster. We'll be able to get back to normal. If you don't, we're going to sick the law on you. Right?
Bunch of terrorists.
Exactly the same thing here. He's saying, first of all, we're going to wipe you completely out. But if you listen to us, you'll be able to stay